All right, welcome back everyone. I'm Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and if you are just joining us, definitely hit the subscribe button to stay updated on all of these wonderful videos. In this video, we're going to talk about markups and documentation. So we're not going to do any pure SwiftUI coding in this video, but we're going to talk about some of the comments that we can leave in our code to really make us look like professional developers. And we're going to go over a bunch of different techniques on how to mark up our code, starting with simple stuff like maybe a comment just for yourself, telling yourself something to do later, or this function does this. But then we're going to go into some more advanced comments where we can actually add documentation to functions and views so that when other developers or our manager comes into our code, they can see very professionally, very elegantly exactly what your code is doing. So of course, if you're developing an app just for yourself and you're the only person that's coding inside of it, some of these markups might not be important. You could probably skip some of it in that app because you already know what the functions you're writing are doing. But if you're applying for a job or you're working on a team, being able to write really good documentation goes a long way. And it's actually a requirement for a lot of jobs. So if you're thinking about skipping this video because we're not doing any actual coding, I highly recommend you to just give me 5 minutes and go through some of this basic documentation because it's going to go a long way and it is very important for you to understand as a learning developer. So with that said, we're going to write some real basic code and then we're going to mark it up. Let's get into it. Welcome back everyone. In this video, of course, we're going to create a new file. So let's right click on that navigator, create a new file. And we're talking about documentation. So this will be a SwiftUI view, but let's call it Documentation Bootcamp. Go ahead and click Create. Once you're inside, let's click Resume on the canvas and get coding. All right, so again, there's not going to be much actual coding in this video. We're going to talk about the documentation, but let's start out by creating a very basic screen here. So let's add a navigation view, open the brackets. Inside the navigation view, let's add a VStack. In the VStack, I'll add some text saying hello. And let's give it a for each loop. So we need some data for that for each loop. So let's do @state_var data, and it will be of type array of string. And we'll just set this equal to, for now, we'll do array. For now, we'll do a bunch of maybe fruits. So we'll do apples, oranges, bananas. Just leave it at that for now. And then in the VStack, under this text, let's add a for each loop. Let's open the parentheses and use the ID and content. Again, I'm moving faster here because we've covered all of this in previous videos. For the for each, let's pass in our data. Let's give it an ID by using \self, and the content will press enter, get rid of this ugly completion, and this will be for each name, we'll call it. And then each of these names, we'll just add a text. So we'll do text, and we'll put in name here. Let's just make this font headline. And before we finish up this view, let's, at the bottom of the VStack, let's add a navigation title. Let's call it Documentation Bootcamp. Lastly, let's add a button on the right side of the navigation bar. So we'll do .navigation bar trailing, items trailing. And for this view, we're going to add a button. So I'll press delete on the view, and then we'll start adding our button here. So let's do a button, open the parentheses. Let's just use the title string protocol approach. The title of the button will say alert. And for the action, we're going to show an alert. So at the top here, let's do @state_var show alert of type bool equals false. And for the action, let's just click enter, and then we'll call show alert.toggle. So a very simple button here and then we toggle show alert. Let's click resume on the canvas to make sure that this all connected and looks how we want it to look. That actually looks a little ugly. Let's get rid of the word bootcamp in the title. We'll call it just documentation. For the VStack, let's just change that to a scroll view for now. So it is formatted to the top. And this looks a little better. The last thing I want to do in setting up this screen is when we click on this alert, I want to actually show an alert. So underneath this navigation bar title, let's call it .alert is presented. And we're going to present it when show alert gets toggled. So money sign show alert. And then for the content, we want to return an alert. So I'm going to create a function at the bottom. I've done this in previous videos. We'll call func get alert. Open and close parentheses. It's going to return an alert, and then we'll open the brackets. In here, we will just return alert, open the parentheses with a title. And the title requires a text, and the text obviously requires a string. Now normally I would type a string in directly here, but for this video I want to pass in this string as a parameter to the alert. So as a parameter to this function, let's call text of type string. And then this text we're just going to pass into our text. And now in our alert up here where we have the content, let's just call get alert. And it's looking for some text, so let's just say this is the alert. Click resume on the canvas one more time. Let's make sure that alert is showing up and it is working. Click the alert, this is the alert. And now let's get into some documentation. So the main reason we add documentation is basically to clean up our files so that if someone else was looking into our code, they would very easily be able to understand what's going on. They would understand the structure, where certain things are on certain screens. So right now our view is fairly short, but there will be times when this view gets very, very long. And it doesn't have to always be a view. It could be any class or any file you make in your app. But when it gets long, it's hard to tell sometimes what's going on. So to clean that up, we basically use markups and documentation. So let's start here. I want to show the mini map. So this is new, but let's click on the adjust editor options on the top right of Xcode. And we're going to show the mini map. And it's this little bar that you see in the middle here. And again, when you have longer views and longer files, this bar is going to have little code like this at the top, but all the way down across the entire bar. And you'll be able to scroll on it. So when you scroll on the view, it moves with this mini map. And you can click around this mini map to move to different parts of your code. But of course, when we're looking at the mini map right now, we can't tell what any of these sections of the code are, right? Because it all just looks like little colored blur lines. And we can fix that. So the first thing we're going to do is add a couple marks. So the main way I've seen in SwiftUI that people break up their view is into three sections. You have properties, which is where you list all of your data points like this. We have the body, which is the actual view code for this view. And then at the bottom, you have all your functions. So let's break that up, and we're going to very simply create three marks. We'll do 2 backslashes, and then we'll capitalize mark. And then some people like to use a dash. I like to use a colon. And then we'll title this properties. I like to use uppercase for these marks. Some people like to use lowercase. But you can see as soon as we added this properties here, it is now on our mini-map. So up here in the mini-map, we can see that the properties section is right here. So if we ever wanted to scroll to it, it would be very easy. Let's add another one for the body. We'll do backslash mark, and we'll do body. You can see that on the mini-map here. And then one more at the bottom, we will do mark functions. Let's also do one under here, and we'll do mark preview, just so we know where the preview area is. And we can see this very nicely on our mini-map here. So if I wanted to scroll to the properties, or the functions, it's very easy to just navigate my view now. The next thing I want to talk about quickly is just comments. So a lot of times in your app, you want to leave comments either for another viewer or even just for yourself. So if I was working in this and I wanted to add maybe some comments about what I needed to still do. So I'm going to add a regular comment here, and we do that with the 2 backslashes. But this time, I'm not going to include mark, because if I include mark, it's going to come up on that mini map. And I just want this to be a regular comment right here. So let's just put working copy dash things to do, and then maybe number 1 will be fixed title. So this is just a regular comment in our view, and it's great and it works fine. But what happens if I want to make this comment multiple lines? Well, I could just go to the next line and 2 backslashes, and then add maybe add the number 1 on the next line, and then I can go on and so forth with number 2, and then fix alert or whatever we want to call it. And this is great, but it is a little annoying to do these 2 backslashes on every line. Because if I want to do this again, it would be 3, fix something else. And there's a better way to do this. We can use the backslash and then press the star, which is the number 8 key on my keyboard, and then I'll press enter. So when we have this backslash asterisk or star, whatever you want to call it, all of the typing between the start of this and then the end, which is where we have the star backslash, is going to be comment. So in here I could put all of this without having to type in these 2 backslashes. So I'll say working copy dash things to do, colon, 1, fix title, 2, fix alert. So this is a little better already. And I'm just going to delete this first version now because we don't need it. And what's really cool about these comments is that they're foldable. So if I go up to the top and click on the editor and click on code folding and click fold, it'll actually fold up all of my comments. And I can double click on this to open it again. So if I had a really long text here with a whole bunch of comments, maybe I could do a whole essay in here. And then all I need to do is fold this up and it will hide from the view. And the shortcut is pressing the Option, Command, and then the left arrow key. And it will just fold it all up for us. And that code folding technique we can actually use on pretty much anything that has an open brackets. So if I wanted to do it on this navigation view, I could do it here. If I wanted to do it on the body, I could do it here. And you'll get used to this as you start coding more. We could do it on the entire view. Option, Command, left, and it folds it all up. But for our purposes today, we're just talking about these markups and documentations. So this folding is very convenient. And if I were to actually use this in an app, I would probably put the title outside of the fold. So I'll cut this and put it here with just 2 backslashes. So this way, if I fold up all this code, it just says working copy things to do, and then I have all the code nice and neatly in here. So I have like the title outside of the fold. And the last thing on this I want to mention is that if you're working in a project with a whole bunch of other developers, it's pretty common that people will want you to put your name here on who made this comment. So I would put Nick and then working copy things to do, and then I could just fold this up when I'm done. So nice, easy, neat way to add some comments to our documentation. So now let's talk about comments within the body view. So if you've been following this course, most of the views we've made have been very simple. And when we get complicated views, I personally like to create other variables, which you've seen when we've used the sum view, just to make sure everything is nice and neat. But some SwiftUI developers prefer to keep all of their code directly in this body. So instead of creating other variables that we can reference outside of this body, a lot of developers just like putting all of their code directly in here. And that's fine, but sometimes it gets very long, because if I had a ton of logic within our scroll view or within our navigation view, sometimes it's hard to figure out which of these brackets we're inside. So are we in the navigation view? Are we in the scroll view? So it's a common approach in SwiftUI for people to mark the start and the end of some of these containers. So for this navigation view, we could do 2 backslashes and we'll do start, nav. And then we'll go to the end of the navigation view and we would do 2 backslashes, end, nav. And we'll do the same thing for the scroll view. So we'll do 2 backslashes, start, scroll view. I'll just call it scroll v. And then go to the end of the scroll view and we'll do end, scroll view. I personally don't like this method because I think it looks a little messy, but it is very common and you will see it in apps. But as you are a beginner just getting into development, sometimes this is nice and easy because you're making sure that you're within your scroll view, and when you're adding different modifiers to different items, you know exactly what you're adding it to. So are you adding it to the scroll view? Are you adding it to the navigation view? And so on. The main thing I like to comment on in the view is the layers of the view. So right now we kind of just have one layer. There is no background here. But if I hold the command button and click on the scroll view, and I embed it in a Z stack. And before the scroll view, let's add color dot red dot ignores safe area. And now in our app, as you can see, we have the background layer, and then we have the foreground layer, which is the scroll view. And personally, I like to separate these layers out and then comment them. So before this color red, I would do background, and then before the foreground layer, I would do foreground. Just keeps it nice and neat. Now, as I mentioned before, some people prefer to keep all of their logic in here. Personally, I like creating subviews of the body. So for this foreground, I would go down to the bottom here, and I would create a private var foreground layer of type SumView, open the brackets, and I will cut this scroll view here, and I will paste it into the foreground layer. And then in the foreground section, I will just add foreground layer here. So when it's this nice and neat, and it's only one line and one line, you don't really need this extra comment for the foreground and background, but it does help when you get into complex apps. And the last thing I want to touch on is how we can actually add real documentation to some of these items that we are making. So if we hold the option button and click on any of these purple things that are default in Xcode, so if we click on the navigation view, we can get a summary for what a navigation view is. If we do hold the option button and click on the Z stack, it'll tell us exactly that. We could do it for the navigation title, and it will tell us, it gives us a summary, it gives us an example of the declaration, and then there's actually a whole discussion here on what the navigation title is and how it might be different on iOS or watchOS. And we can do this for anything, for the alert, for example, and in the alert, we can see that exactly what it is with the summary, but then there's also parameters. So when we create this alert, we have that is presented parameter, and it's telling us here is presented is a binding to whether the alert should be shown. So this documentation here is very helpful. And if I hold the option button and click on this foreground layer, you'll see that there actually is no summary because we haven't added any documentation to this. So to add a summary to a variable or a view or a function, all we need to do is 3 backslashes right before it. So right here, I have the foreground layer, and then I add 3 backslashes, and I'm going to add a summary to this foreground layer. So we'll say this is the foreground layer that holds a scroll view. And now that we have this summary comment, if I'm in our code up here, because this foreground layer could be somewhere else in our app, it could be on another view, and if I'm up here coding and I want to figure out what is this foreground layer exactly, I can hold the option button, click on foreground layer, and now I have this nice summary. This is the foreground layer that holds the scroll view. And this is also great because if I had another developer that was working in this app and they were confused on what this foreground layer is, they could just click on this and read the summary and get familiar with what exactly this foreground layer is. And the last thing I want to do is add some documentation like this to our getAlert function. So I'm going to scroll down to the getAlert here, and I'm going to hold the command button, click on getAlert, and then there's a nice handy helper here that says add documentation. So I'm going to click on that. And now we have this documentation that pops up above the getAlert. And the first thing is it says description, but this is the summary that we just did for the foreground layer. So for the description, let's describe what this function is doing. It is gets an alert with a specified title. Then it's asking us for the parameter. So we can add some details about what this text is. So when we call getAlert, we need to add in some text. And now we can tell other people, other developers, what this text parameter is. And it's going to be, this is the title for the alert. And finally, it has returns. And our function returns an alert. So in here, we'll put returns an alert with a title. And you can customize these as much as you want. But now when we call getAlert, we can access all of these parameters here. So on this getAlert, if I hold the option button and click on getAlert, We have summary, gets an alert with specified title. We have the declaration, of course. We also have parameters where the text, this is the title for the alert. And then what does it return? It returns an alert with a title. So obviously we didn't really need all these extra documentations for this very simple function, but as you make complex functions, this is going to help yourself and other developers just really understand and summarize what's going on. The last and final thing I want to touch on here is a couple additions that we can add to this code here. So within here, we can also add some discussion. So I'm going to press enter 3 times in here. And you just need to add some space, I think, basically between the summary and the parameter. And now in this section, we can put in the discussion. And that's basically just a space where we can put in pure English exactly what we mean by all of this. And this should be the most straightforward part of this documentation. So I'll put this function creates and returns an alert immediately. The alert will have a title based on the text parameter, but it will not have a message. Because in an alert, you can add a title and a message, and we're just adding a title here. And now we have a discussion for this. So if I hold the option button and click on Get Alert, we have this new section that says Discussion, and it tells us exactly what we just typed here. And the very final thing I want to add is we can actually add a sample implementation for other developers. So I'm going to press enter again, and in here we're going to use 3 grave accents. And a grave accent is the button that's on your keyboard and next to the number 1. It's where that squiggly tilde is. So this squiggly tilde, but we're going to use just the regular grave accent. We're going to put 3 of these on there. Again, this is the button that's next to the number 1 on my keyboard. And when we use 3 of these grave accents, it basically is telling the code that this is where we're going to put mock code into this documentation. So we actually also need to add 3 accents when we're done adding fake code. So I'll do 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, and then inside here, let's add some fake code. And I'm going to add a fake implementation of this alert so that someone else could see exactly what it's going to return. So I'm going to copy the function basically and put it in here. So we'll call get alert, open the parentheses, text, colon, and then I'm going to put a fake implementation. So as if it was up here. So up here we put this is the alert, but down here I'm just going to put hi in quotes, close the parentheses, and this is going to return an alert. So I'm going to copy this section now. So we'll put alert, open the parentheses, title, colon, it's going to be text. And then in this, where this text is, I'm going to put in what we input. So I'll put in hi. Close the quotes, close the parentheses again. So now we have this fake implementation, and let's hold the option button, click on the alert one last time. Below our discussion, we have this fake implementation where someone could easily see if I call get alert and put in hi, it's going to return me an alert with the text hi. So super easy to add. And the last thing I want to add to this is above the parameter here, let's also add a warning. So I'm going to put space dash space warning colon, and let's just put the warning as there is no additional message in this alert. It's not really something that needs a warning, but I just want to show you that we can add warnings. So if I hold the option button, click on get alert, we also have this warning section. And in here, you can basically just warn other developers saying like, hey, make sure if you're using this function that there is a user ID. And if there is no user ID, then it will return nil or something like that. And you can just warn other developers a little bit about it. So in conclusion, again, when you have very simple views like we had at the start of this video, you don't really need all these comments and documentations. But as you create very, very long views, as you create complex functions that are much more complicated than this, a lot of these are going to help you to just stay organized. And if you are sharing this with a larger team, with other developers, these comments are going to come in handy. But that's it for this video. I know it was a long one. I apologize. There was just a lot to cover that I wanted to get into this video. So I hope you guys are enjoying this course. If you are, hit that subscribe button. It means a lot to me. And as always, I'm Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you guys in the next video.